Welcome, friends, fans, and dairy products of all ages, to The Main Reason, the not so cleverly named show about the main reason you should main a champion in a particular MOBA environment. Might in the future talk about MMO classes, but for now it's MOBA. Talks about things. And it's going to be my usual non-scripted, just shooting the breeze sort of format. It's not going to be terribly concise. And this is sort of a counterpart to my other series about, like, champions that are overpowered or in need of significant adjustment that people usually don't talk about being incredibly overpowered. Such as the first episode of that, Nasus, who has very little counterplay if played correctly and will almost always become an unstoppable killing machine in your game. That if the enemy team plays to, is going to win the game single-handedly. Or the second episode, in which Vladimir is like nearly impossible to kill and does a lot of damage for sustainability, but isn't necessarily as 100% stupid as Nasus is. This is going to be talking about champions that you should main, and while it will include common picks sometimes, it's mainly going to be oriented towards uncommon picks that I like. Things that I main, generally, because that's the one I know most about. Why you should main what I made. But anyway, today's episode is going to be pretty much the personification of that underrated things you should main, at least for a little bit, category. Talon, the Blade Shadow. He's pretty much the least played assassin in the entire game right now. Least played primary assassin. And if you look on most tier lists, like if you googled LoL tier lists, and you know, the first one on the top of the page will probably be nerfplease.com. Well, on a lot of tier lists, especially nerfplease, as of 5.11, Talon is considered a reasonably high tier pick, and on the Nerf Please tier lists for 5.11, he's pretty much the highest rated assassin in the game right now. And if you play this guy, he's very rarely played these days, since he got the silence removed on his gap closer. But if you pick this guy, you'll often see people say, oh, why don't you just play Katarina or Zed, who are actually like dropped significantly in tier and popularity and win rate recently due to recent nerfs. And this little video is going to be talking about some of the benefits and strengths of Talon. And you'll notice, and if you follow the tier list since the season started, Talon has barely moved. Talon has not dropped nearly as significantly as assassins have had the tendency to drop during this tank meta. And that's because Talon isn't hit as hard by the tank meta as other assassins tend to be. He's still weak against tanks because he's an assassin, primary role assassin, but he hasn't nearly been hurt as badly by the tank meta. Now, why play a Talon instead of the other ones? Well, but in Zed's case, he's a reasonably high skill floor assassin. In Zed's case, you can't just pick up the Zed and be good. You have to like really learn a lot of different little sub mechanics to get. You have to learn Zed, and Zed specifically, to be good at Zed. And being good at Zed won't really get you good at any other type of assassin. So maybe Katarina. And Katarina, why not play Katarina? Well, honestly, she's really easy. She's really powerful. She was recently nerfed to where her early burst is bad. The reason why you shouldn't play Katarina is Katarina is one of those infamously OP champions. So when they say, oh look, it's a Katarina, the jungler's like, okay, I better gank the shit out of that. And it's like, oh, in team fights, we better focus the Katarina. No, because you're infamously overpowered, everyone knows what your shit does, and everyone will be focusing you, trying to shut you down, if they have any sense. So that's a disadvantage for playing Katarina. Talon, however, he's not very popular, so he's one of those closet OPs. Not OP, really. He's not overpowered. He's powerful. He's an assassin. As an assassin, he's really solid and will do his assassin job really, really good. And he's got some things that are like really hard to counterplay against. But he's not necessarily overpowered. Anyway, he's not popular and people think he's bad, so you won't be focused. But let's talk about broader terms, about more legit reasons to play Talon over other assassins. One, with few exceptions, Diana being one of them, and to a somewhat extent Echo being another exception, is most of the primary role assassins tend to have weak laning phases. Laning phase being that time in which, okay, I'm in the lane, my opponent's in the lane across from me, we're trying to farm up, we're trying to farm minions without and poke each other at the appropriate times with ranged damage, and if we can go all in and kill the dude after a successful dueling scenario and get an advantage. And then once we've killed the opponent, we gotta clear the wave and either roam to other lanes to kill the people there and give our team an advantage in that lane, or deal damage to the tower. And then once the tower's down and we've started to group up and start roaming for objectives as a team, that's when the laning phase ends. That's what the laning phase period is in the game. Most assassins have a weak laning phase, with relatively few exceptions. Katarina, powerful, weak laning phase, which is fixed by once you get that first push to the wave where you can roam, you get kills, you're good. Generally, assassin mid laner, you're gonna want to push the wave and get a kill on your opponent, get that wave under tower, and then roam to another lane to get a kill. This is kind of fiddly with a lot of assassins because, one, all primary role assassins are ranged and typically have to use their skills for ranged attacks. And with few exceptions, those abilities that they use aren't really good at clearing the wave fast. So they can't power push a lane really easily once they've killed their opponent early on during that first initial laning phase there. An exception to this, Diana, Echo to an extent played precisely, but not to an extent as Diana, or Talon is an exception to this rule. Get a couple of ranks in your W, that shit pushes the lane fast. Because Talon's primary strength as an assassin is he does a lot of AoE damage. Even though two of his abilities are orchestrated towards single target damage, his W, which is the rake cone that goes out and then comes back in, and his ultimate, which slings out a whole bunch of blades in all directions, which then come back in after a period of time, all do large amounts of area effect damage. So, once you get a couple ranks in that W, you can actually clear that wave really fast, which is also somewhat of a drawback to him, because your poke also will push the lane. But still, if you play Talon correctly and are doing your job correctly in the lane, you will outpoke a lot of people. Most assassins you will be able to outpoke, slinging out that range damage, because your rake is really good poke for an assassin. Now, this also comes to the part where usually when you're poking, you're hitting the entire minion wave too. And as I said, your poke is really good at clearing the wave. So that means you're going to have to deal with a situation in which your lane is pushed up a lot of the time. You're going to have to learn how to monitor your pushing, because you're raking the minion wave and killing it. You're pushing the lane. You don't have as much of an advantage to be able to control your lane pushing as precisely as some assassins do, unless you're really well practiced in it. And the W isn't really all that mana efficient if you just carefully can angle the cone where it only hits the enemy champion. It's not super mana efficient in that regard. So you're just going to have to adjust to pushing the wave hard, which is something most assassins don't have to deal with. But it's actually not as big a deal as it sounds. If you manage it's a little bit of a fiddly thing early because the lane will like start pushing up and you're not ready to roam quite yet, but you can easily just like dip a little bit and ward up, be careful, and like pop rake, go back a little bit, to go back in, like pop your rakes. You can farm under their tower a lot easier than other assassins can because your rake is really good. You could still do that as long as you're careful that you don't get ganked. You gotta like go in and skirmish that sucker. But once you get past that awkward phase, when you hit like level 4 or preferably level 6, you can do that as a process of all-inning, getting a kill, clearing the lane, and then roaming. This is like level 4 is pretty much the earliest I would recommend you being able to you doing this. And to all in the enemy champion, burn him down, at minimum kick him out of the lane, depending on what you're facing. But if you kill him, you can push the lane to where your minions are under the tower and attacking the tower, and you can just book it to another lane that's pushed up. Go up in there and gank them, and get a kill or an assist. Either one is nice. And then you can just book back to the lane, and if it's not pushed up, it's going to be pushed up. If it's pushed up, you can just continue to go back to where you're going, and do rinse, repeat. He has really, really solid ability to push the lane hard and then roam with that W. And usually you will be able to outtrade a lot of people, unless they have significantly better poke than you, or are really tanky mid laners, such as like a properly built Diana, or some of the AP mid laners, assassin mid laners will have the common sense to start cloth armor, and which will significantly set back your ability to like trade with them because they've got protections against you. But you can usually out-trade a lot of people, unless they have extreme poke damage, where like a Kale isn't really as a huge issue as it would seem. But when with a Kale, you all in them and you do these things, and unless you kill them, you're going to be that entire way disengaging, taking like big hits from bursty things. This applies to all ranged champions. You don't immediately burst down. You're going to be taking pot shots every time as you're backing up. So with ranged, it's usually a good idea to wait until you've got your ultimate to just like start really all-inning people. So that way you can do your all-in, do your damage combination, ult. You're invisible, so you can get to a safer position to complete your disengage, and then close the thing, possibly executing them. And most ranged champions that are in mid lane, except maybe like an Urgot built correctly, you'll be able to like delete them with the full-fledged combination, including your ultimate. You'll be able to trade really effectively, especially once you get your ultimate, because then you have safe disengage. Yeah. I've rambled a bit in there, but in summary of that entire section there, one of the first reason you play Talon as opposed to other assassins is he has a much stronger laning phase than most assassins. Another reason you would play a Talon as opposed to other assassins is he's pretty much the perfect gateway assassin. He doesn't have any like learn these mechanics or not be good. He is a very low skill floor champion. Pretty much the only thing you have to learn to be good at Talon is the basic how you operate an assassin in the role you're in the particular place on the battlefield you are at. Learn how to do an assassin there. You've learned Talon. Now, learning his particular combination is relatively simple, but is the only other mechanic you'll need to know. What is his damage rotation for his burst, which is relatively simple, and you can pretty much figure it out yourself. Plus, another reason that he's a good gateway assassin, why you should play him as opposed to other champions if you're picking but pretty much if you're picking up assassins for the first time and going for the gateway assassin thing is that he doesn't have easy escapes. Like, even his invisibility is not a guaranteed escape, but it's a pretty decent escape. He's not one of those champions like, oh, I can just go in and I'll get out. You know, you actually have to learn how to engage properly as an assassin. If you're just like, oh, I'm gonna start playing assassin, I'm gonna pick Katarina, you won't learn proper disengage protocols. You will not learn how to play any other assassin in the game appropriately, because you're just gonna be able to escape easily. If you play an assassin that doesn't have free escapes, then you're gonna learn how to engage properly and team fight properly and initiate and get out properly, and those skills will make you better at doing that with every other assassin, because you've extremely polished your engagement mechanics. He's not bad at escaping once you learn how to engage properly. In fact, he's quite good, but he doesn't have like, I press a button and I'm out. He's a good gateway assassin. Another reason you would pick Talon over other assassins is he's incredibly versatile. He is a really good split pusher, because he can really push a lane fast, and if he gets where like people are starting to collapse on him, a large majority of the time, if you're like smart about what you're doing and being aware of your situation, keeping an eye on the minimap, figuring out what people are, it's really hard to like collapse on a Talon played carefully and correctly that's split pushing a lane. It's like, oh, a guy's coming up behind me, a guy's coming up there, ult, speed boost, go super speed away down this path. They can't tell which direction I pathed for a couple of seconds. Flash doesn't remove your invisibility with the ultimate. I have visibility over this wall, so I can technically use my backstab gap closer on this jungle camp. If you're pushing in a lane and they don't be smart about collapsing in on you, you can get away every time. Once you've gotten like Yomu's Ghostblade built, which is a standard assassin item, because you've got 2 speed boosts. You're faster than everyone on the map. About a couple of seconds. As long as you're aware of your surroundings, it's nearly impossible to punish your split pusher, unless they're really, really smart, or you make a mistake. He's very versatile. He's laning. He can assassinate single targets good. He does good to AoE damage. He's a good split pusher, and he doesn't fall off as hard if he's behind, and depending on team composition. If you have a team with like a good tank on it on your side, you can come back. Unless the enemy team is like rife with CC, you can still play from behind as Talon. Now, if the enemy team is rife with CC, there's pretty much nothing you can do from behind. That applies to everyone in the game, because the enemy team is rife with CC. If you have a solid team composition, and you can usually play well from behind as Talon. He's really solid, really versatile, good laning phase compared to other assassins, and doesn't fall off as hard when playing from behind. It's really good. His roams, as previously said, are actually really, really solid because he pushes the lane really hard. You just got to be careful about how hard you push the lane innately, because people will look to exploit that if they see what you're doing and how you're doing it, or they know anything about Talon. That's pretty much his only like hardcore weakness, is he pushes lane hard early, and that he's melee. But yeah, it actually takes effort to play Talon properly. He doesn't have any free escapes. You have to actually be smart when you engage. You have to engage properly. You can't just go in, delete a motherfucker, and get out immediately. And angles and who you port to with your gap closer and a whole bunch of other things can really optimize your knowledge of how to play assassins and engage properly when you don't have that free escape. And he does respectable AoE damage, so even if he can't go in, he can fling out rakes to like skirmish fight from the edges of the team fight reasonably well, because his rake actually hurts really good and slows people decently, so he's also good at chasing. So yeah, really solid, really versatile. Now, Against a Talon, you've got to worry about his gap closer, which is an instant blink to you teleport thing, similar to Katarina's Shunpo, but he can't use it to port to allied minions or wards. He doesn't have a free escape. It's just an enter situation. Doesn't do any damage. He just goes behind you to the other side of you from where he was, and his successive damage is augmented slightly to you. So he'll be just like, he's there, he's like next to you, he's jumped in, boom, he's next to you, and now he's going to burst you. That's really the only thing that's like super powerful with him, and pretty much every assassin has that. So it doesn't make him incredibly overpowered. His is actually one of the weaker ones because it doesn't get him out either. But yeah, you gotta figure out how he does his style of jumping in for the all-in. How he does that. If the minion wave is getting a little bit thin, where he's used his Q and the minion wave is low, that's the period of time in which he's thinking about all-inning you. He uses his rake, the wave is down, one more rake will get it. That's this period of time you have to start worrying about, because once that sucker comes off cooldown in like about 9-ish seconds, that's when he'll think about jumping on you, using that rake through you, clearing out the wave at the same time so it doesn't get minion aggro, and then completing his combination on you. Or factoring in that rake after the rest of his damage combination as part of it. A smart Talon won't rake you until the rest of his combination is off, so he can like get you as you're running away. But another key tip for like learning this all-inning technique to counter a Talon is his gap closer has pretty much the exact same ranges as rake. So observe how far his rake goes, and that's his engaging range, practically. If you learn how to properly fight at the edge of that, to where he can't comfortably all-in you, he has to like come a little closer to all-in you, it becomes a lot easier to read when he's going to jump in on you. And also be careful about how you like engage or poke him, because a common tactic in a dueling situation is to, okay, they've used an ability. If it's an ability I can dodge, I'll just, without any freaking consequence, dodge it with my E. If you have an ability with a wind up there, that's a tool out of your arsenal that can't damage him now. He has all of his abilities. So, if he can dodge that with his E to get out of it, and then like boom, 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 boom you, then he's going to outtrade you. Even if you manage to get a couple of ranged pops on him, he's going to large majority of the time be able to outtrade you. So once you've used an ability, you also have to like worry about him engaging to capitalize on the fact that you're one ability down. If you hit him with it, it's less chance, but still not an incredible less chance that he won't engage you. But yeah, say I'm Universal Assassin will apply with CC. CC burst him down. Works reasonably, unless your CC has a wind up, or you miss it. Like, frequently I'll engage an Echo in lane, and he'll like throw his delimajig out there, and I'll position myself slightly differently, and then like use my E on him, because either he's going to try and put it behind me so we can rush me into it, or he's going to put it behind himself to capitalize on my E. So if I rotate slightly and port to a different location, like he's here, I'm here. He puts it behind him, thinking he's going because previously he put it behind me and I eat immediately. So he puts it like behind himself. Rotate a little bit, boop, I'm not in it. But then the Echo will start learning. It's like, oh, I'll put it on myself. In which case, you just like rake. You rake poke. Usually, against certain matchups, if you can outtrade him, and if you have like enough CC where you could significantly like lock him down, he will make sure he can delete you immediately before he goes in. So when you start getting low, be even more careful. And this general Echo counterplay, not Echo counterplay tips, Talon counterplay tips. So there. Learn how he prefers to engage. Learn his engage range, which is the range of his rake, just about. And make sure you use your abilities correctly, poke him correctly. In the case of like Diana's case, often if you hit him with your Q, which is like how you ult, and he will like immediately get just jump on you, and then like ult, just jump you like boom 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 burst combo ult, and just try to immediately outburst you and like become invisible so you can't ult him. Diana is actually a really hard matchup for Talon because you can outpoke Talon as Diana, and you're a bruiser-ish assassin, so you usually out-sustain him too. You can usually like take his damage really good. But yeah, generally though, Talon is very underrated. He's incredibly versatile for an assassin. He can be played in like mid, top, or somewhat in the jungle if you're comfortable with the jungle role. And he's incredibly versatile as far as what he can do. Split push, assassinate, reasonably good team fighting if you learn how to engage properly and your team supports you with it. Reasonably good team fighting. Really good team fighting. And really good roams. He's very solid. His vulnerability is his lack of escapes, and if you're not properly executed. You can escape fluidly and consistently if you do it right. That's right. Talon's vulnerability, his primary weakness, is you. His kit is very solid. It does its job well without being incredibly overpowered. You are the vulnerability, or the primary vulnerability there, and the fact that he's melee. That's not really a champion exclusive vulnerability. So anyway, some might argue it's like, oh, Nasus is like, his vulnerability requires him to be played incorrectly. And you're saying Talon's only vulnerability is you, is only being played incorrectly. Not really the same thing, because you can be outplayed still, you know, as Talon. You can be counterplayed. Nasus can't be counterplayed if he's played correctly. If you play Talon correctly, you can still be counterplayed. You know, they can just outplay you. You know, there's a difference between your only vulnerability is the player and your only vulnerability is making mistakes. Big line there. But anyway, this is Cheese of Ages signing off. Enjoy Talon.